these movements, as you say, dear Ustara. Jazakallah khairan. I also want to give recognition to Dr. Fatima Abdullah. Dr. Fatima Abdullah is the wife of Professor Badri. She's joining us today in this lecture. I had the honor to meet her personally several times, and we have organized different initiatives, and mashallah, she is really such a knowledgeable scholar in herself. So thank you for also keeping Professor Badri's legacy alive, and mashallah, we will looking forward to listen to you. I think it's on Tuesday or Monday that you will have a presentation in the conference, and Dr. Fatima has amazing thoughts when it comes to spirituality, comparing spirituality in a secular manner with Islamic spirituality. We listened to her before, and she has done many great research in this field. So barakallahu fikum, Dr. Fatima, for being with us, and all our greetings and love and appreciation to your family that have really been the pioneering family in the field of Islamic psychology. Dear excellent brothers and sisters, and participants and scholars, we're over time right now, where we're supposed to have Q&As. Please forgive me for perhaps I needed to be more strict with the timing. My sincere apologies. But I also really appreciated all of the lectures. So I think you all enjoyed as well. With your permission and dear organizers, we will keep a couple of minutes here now to let some questions from the audience be answered from all of our great presentators and lecturers. And after that, we will close this first period. And I will also thank for myself, because on the next period, there will be a different Sharon host, but I will be back together with you guys tomorrow in the third session, the third part of the conference, inshallah. So let's see which questions we have. And by the way, if you have Salah time, some brothers and sisters are writing to me, can I go to do Salah? We're so humble, dear brothers and sisters. Of course you can do that. You know, you don't need to even ask. And feel free to come whenever you're are done, and may Allah accept your Salah and Ibadah, inshallah. So dear organizers, Sister Noor, Sister Anisa, I think, could we get some of the questions from the audience that we can address to our excellent scholars, inshallah?
Yeah, brother, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Barakallahu feekum.
Yeah. So maybe most of the question is about the legacy of Prof. Malik Badri's work in Arabic world. Maybe just because not really, maybe you can, our brother Hisham can highlight in which country now maybe it is developing the Islamic psychology movement, just to share with the audience.
Jazakallah khairan, Ustara Diana. Unfortunately, Dr. Hisham has left the session, but maybe we'll try to answer ourselves. Actually, I personally have been engaging a lot in the Arab world. We have a big regional chapter in ISIP in the Arab world. There's a lot of things going on in the Arab world. A lot of that is inspired by Professor Badri's work, specifically scholars in Sudan, in Egypt, that are following the path of Dr. Professor Malik Badri, and also Dr. Najati, actually, which was also one of the pioneering scholars in Egypt. And then we can see that even in the Khalij countries and in Middle East and Jordania and Syria, of course, in Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of efforts now, and both from the aspect of perhaps the process of Islamization of certain psychological things that are applicable to the Islamic paradigm, but also to root in an indigenous Islamic psychological approach. So there is a lot of movements going on. What I see could be of big importance is to connect what's happening in the Arab world with the rest of the world, because there is sometimes, and this is not only in the Arab world, even in Turkey and Iran and in Indonesia, Malaysia, we're also writing in different languages. Ustada Hanan, actually, you said something very beautiful. You said that Arabic and Farsi and other languages are important to know. And actually, the Ottomans, when they ruled, they have a saying. They said that the language of religion is Arabic, the language of administration is Turkish, the language of culture and poetry is Farsi. So we really encourage people to study Arabic, but also study Farsi and Turkish and Urdu and Bahasa. Dr. Ambarhat actually are translating the works of Professor Sheikh Tanvi, which was one of the pioneer scholars in Islamic psychology in the Indo-Pak region. So there is a lot of works that are being done in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Sudan, in Morocco, and it needs to be disseminated in the world and the rest of the ummah. And inshallah, we will together, all of us do that, inshallah. I hope I could answer. Is it anybody else, Dr. Bagus or Professor Dareen, who want to add something there perhaps, or Ustara Hanan?
I actually think you touched on that very, very well, Brother Sayyid Jamaluddin. In the next conference, inshallah, you should be presenting a topic on your own.
Jazakallah khairan, Ustara. It will be my honor to learn from all of you. Barakallahu fikum. So is it any other questions you guys want to address, dear excellent brothers and sisters and participants? Okay, perfect. Barakallahu fikum. So there's a question, why did we name psychology as ilm al-nafs when psychology means the study of mind? Jazakallah khairan. Would you like to address this question? Perhaps Ustara Hanan, would you like to address it?
Yeah, so in relation to al-nafs, remember al-nafs is the Islamic understanding of the human self. The term psychology, is a modern one. And even in its traditional times, it was called the science of the soul, but obviously when you have the revolution of a lot of the secular sciences and the material sciences coming about, it transformed, into the material sciences alone, doing away with the soul and spirituality. So when we talk about al-nafs, al-nafs is an Islamic discipline, of understanding the science of the soul. And when we are trying to incorporate what we understand in today's psychology to be able to integrate that knowledge and make it useful and practical for Muslims today. I've never understood psychology to mean the study of the mind, even in the Western traditions. Mind has only been one part of it. In my training, it's always looked at the science of human behavior, attitudes, and emotions. So even at times, Western psychology would even question the mind because you can't see it, you can't feel it. And it's not material, because it took, for quite a while, it took a form of scientific reductionism, as I mentioned earlier. And it's only slowly coming to appreciate that psychology, is for human beings, and human beings have different cultures, different languages, because language can influence psychology as well. So that even political psychology, environmental psychology, educational psychology, a lot of fields and areas which we engage day-to-day life, we know, even lifestyle, even nutrition and psychology, so we're moving towards understanding of psychology that integrates different ideas and, even, different spiritual traditions. We know there's Buddhism and psychology, Christianity, psychology, Judaism and psychology. So we're at a time where there isn't much opposition to different types of psychologies, but obviously in the West, they prioritize in your beginning introductory course, on the eclectic, secular, humanistic topics in psychology, but people who are disgruntled with Western psychology, what I do say is just get through the degree, because once you become a psychologist, as long as you abide by the ethical codes of conduct of the association that you're bound to in your country, then you can practice Islamic psychology for Muslims. This is very important, so it's good to understand, Western psychology and critically examine it, which is what Professor Malik Badri wanted us all to do, and then you find your space in the discipline and make it authentic and make it your own. Jazakallah khairan.
MashaAllah, Ustara Hanan, thank you so much for such a thorough answer. MashaAllah, you're so knowledgeable. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Oh, you want to also add, Dr. Bagus? Feel free.
Yes. Actually, I learned from my teacher, Arabic teacher, Dr. Ali. He said that if you look at the English dictionary, the word psyche, it's originated from the Greek. and it means the soul. So the definition of psyche is similar to the definition of nafs, actually. But then in the Western world, they don't believe in the soul and they don't believe in the unseen world. So they change it into a study about behavior and mental processes. But the original word psyche means the nafs, means the soul. Okay, I think we can check that in the dictionary. Thank you.
Barakallahu fikum, Dr. Bagus. It's so true, actually. Etymological, if we look at it from an etymological side, psyche means soul in Greek. So it's true. It's the knowledge of the soul psychology. And when you ask dear participants, if you go to your universities in West and also in East, to tell you the truth, even the Eastern universities are secularized, due to colonialism. And I want to thank Ustada Hanan and Dr. Bagus and the rest of the team for mentioning Triple IT, because Triple IT is such an important organization and, re-emphasizing Islamic thought, So if you ask your professors in secular universities, what is psychology? They will not say it's the science of the soul. So we need to really emphasize on that. And in Arabic, it's ilm al-nafs, which is also the psychology of the knowledge of the nafs and the soul. Barakallahu fikum, Dr. Bagus, an honor to listen to you. MashaAllah, you're so knowledgeable. Do we have one more question, perhaps, Ustada Diana, before? Barakallahu fikum. So this is to Ustada Hanan. To the scholars, Ustada Hanan, what book would you recommend for the beginner students who want to start the psychology studies in Western environment while developing the Islamic perspective? Maybe all the scholars, we can start with you, Ustada Hanan, and then maybe all scholars could give Professor Dareen and Dr. Bagus, you can also give one. Lucia. Welcome, Dr. Hanan.
Okay. I think that you could start inshallah, by reading Dr. Malik Badri's texts, but some of the texts that were profound for me in the early days, when I was an undergraduate and only discovered Islamic psychology. Interestingly, at the same conference, I had met Professor Malik Badri in Australia. The conference organizers had a bookstall, and there was a book that was titled Fitra, Human Nature in Islam. I had never heard of the word fitra before. But I opened the content. It's now called Human Nature in Islam by Yassin Mohammed. Before it was, because originally it was called Fitra. But I remember reading the contents, and it talked about, Western psychology, secular psychology, and how it differs to Islamic understandings of psychology. And I remember when I was reading the book, and I was in second year psychology in my undergrad. Every time I was turning the page, reading this book, I was like, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. So the confusions I was having in my first year no longer were there, because Professor Yassin Mohammed, who had a background in Islamic Sharia and did his master's in psychology, really put together an easy to read, easy to understand book that also helped you to understand the psycho-spiritual development of the human being. So even if you had been introduced to Western psychology, which most of us have, reading that from the outset helped you develop, an integrated framework of understanding the human psyche. One of the other early books that I read before all the new great books that we have today, and I'll touch on them, was, I remember when Professor Abdul Hakim Murad, who is the head of the, what's today the Cambridge Muslim College. And I was not a wealthy person at the time, but there was a book coming out called The Revival of the Islamic Sciences. He was translating Imam al-Ghazali's book, and it was on the how do you subdue the appetite. I can't remember the rest of the title, but I had saved up a lot of my money, and to get this book. I think at the time it was about 150 Australian dollars, including postage, which was a lot of money at the time. But I remember reading the textbook, and it was very, very well articulated, very well referenced as well, because in our area in psychology, we need to ensure that there's adequate referencing, because previous works on Imam al-Ghazali that was written and published in the subcontinent were translated without references. So I thought that was a very profound book to understand the nature of the soul, Ilm al-Nafs, because he did a huge introductory piece on that. But today you're so fortunate, You know, we've got Islamic psychology textbooks. You know, there was one by Sister Aisha on specifically on Islamic psychology that was published in Saudi Arabia. You've got Professor Rasul, who's published many texts on Islamic psychology and even counseling and psychotherapy. You have Dr. Abdurrahman Rothman, who's produced recent textbooks on not only Islamic psychology, but Islamic psychotherapy. You have Dr. Carrie York from the US also writing about Islamic psychology. You know, so you're not left without texts. In my time, there wasn't many. There wasn't any specifically on Islamic psychology as a title. So nobody today has excuses not to be able to find resources. Like I really did jihad and wait for texts to come out in English, because even though I'm Palestinian, you know, but it's shameful that my Arabic is very basic, you know, but I actually had to wait until the work was translated into English. So we wait for Professor Baggis, also Dr. Baggis, to translate his works, you know, from Bahasa to English as well, you know, so because they are important, you know, because we miss out on the treasure of knowledge that exists out there, you know, and if we want to push forward Islamic psychology, the contributions from different cultural backgrounds is so important and so paramount, you know, and I know that, you know, Islamic psychology thrives in Indonesia, and we know Indonesia is the most, you know, populated Muslim country in the world, and there's a lot of literature in Bahasa, you know, so Professor Baggis, if you can push them to translate them, you know, and whoever knows people in Iran and Turkey and, you know, the Middle East, and the subcontinent, you know, there is no excuse because they are being translated. So you just have to go to Amazon or Booktopia or whoever, and you'll see, type in Islamic psychology, you'll see a wealth of resources that are able to you. Also, sorry, I forgot, Dr. Amber Haq, you know, I think we forget his contributions in Islamic psychology, because when Professor Malik, you know, brought everybody together in 1997, he was writing articles in journals about Islamic psychology. You know, his articles were easy to read, you know, they were very good. And I think that, and he's written textbooks on Islamic personality and Islamic psychology as well, you know, and also Triple IT published on Islamic psychology. I better stop before I go over time, but yeah, so that's my answer.
MashaAllah, Dr. Hanan, you gave all the treasures, indeed, treasures. MashaAllah, barakallah fikum, barakallah fikum. Dr. Baggis or Professor Dareen, do you want to add anything? I think actually Dr. Hanan nailed all of it.
I come from the Sufi background. I would suggest to read some Sufi text, especially Ghazali is already, you know, highlighted in these talks, but Rumi is a great giant of psychology. Brother Jabati, he wrote in your language, in Persian, you know. Mesnavi is 6 volumes. And he's used by the Western psychologists, especially storytelling techniques, very often. And I would suggest my dear listeners and friends today to read Mesnavi. And it's really a lot of psychological stuff in it. Thank you.
Barakallah fikum. We're actually doing a halaqah soon with Professor Dareen with Mesnavi, inshallah. We will invite all of you. And Professor Baggis, you know, we always ask you, Dr. Baggis, you need to translate your books now to English, please.
Well, I would just highlight 3 books I think that you must read. The first is Professor Malik Badi, The Dilemma of Muslim. Actually 4, The Dilemma of Muslim Psychologists and Contemplation. I think they are good to start, because from that book we can have a reference to what the next book that we should read. And then the other 2 is the Imam al-Ghazali's The Alchemy of Happiness. It's a short version of Ihya Ulumuddin. I think it's easy to read and it's very inspiring. And then al-Balkhi's The Sustenance of the Soul, that was translated by Prophet Malik Badi. I think those books are a must for you to start, and then you can read other books to you know, to add your knowledge.
MashaAllah, barakallah fikum. Thank you so much. I can also just add the TIIP book, the Traditional Islamic Integrated Psychotherapy. Dr. Huma Keshavarzi, Dr. Fad Khan, and more have written. There is also a book about psychology of personality that Professor Yassin, I think also Dr. Amber Haq has established. So there's a lot of great books, and also the Fitra book of Professor Yassin. I know that the Dr. Hana mentioned, Professor Yassin Muhammad. So thank you so much all. We took so much time from the participants, and thank you for being so generous of your time, Dr. Bagus, Dr. Hana, Professor Dareen, all of the organizers and IAMP and the rest of the team. Let me just conclude that we will meet each other again in 40 minutes. I will not be your host then. Please forgive me for my shortcomings. I will be back tomorrow to help to be part of this blessed conference. It's an honor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity and to trust me, dear organizers. It's an honor. So in 40 minutes, I don't know if you're supposed to leave the Zoom or you can stay in the Zoom. Could I just ask perhaps the administrator, shall the participants leave the Zoom and join, or shall they just be here until we start again?
So up to them. They can
Okay, it's up to people. So you can either leave or you can just close your cameras. We also want to ask you to make dua for Professor Badri. So this will really be something for him. Everything we're doing in all of our association, and Dr. Hana mentioned, all the great associations in West and East and North and South, all the things that we are doing in our initiatives, IANP, ISIP, IAIP, all of these movements that are going around. This is Sadaqa Jariyah for Professor Badri. And this is all his creation that we're trying to keep his legacy. From UK with the programs there as Ihsan organization that Dr. Hana said, to Indonesia with all of the initiatives that Dr. Bagus and his team, to Malaysia with IIUM and all other initiatives. This is Sadaqa Jariyah. So let's do dua for Professor Badri and to that Allah, and we ask Allah to accept all of our efforts as Sadaqa Jariyah for him. So have him in your du'as, please. So we'll meet each other again in about 40 minutes. And I want to once more thank all of our presenters, Dr. Bagus, Professor Suleiman Dareen, Dr. Hisham, and Ustada Hanan for your great presentations. I want to thank IAMP for a great event. I want to thank all of the hosts and all of the administrators and all the students that helped to facilitate, and specifically Ustada Diana, Ustada Emi, and the rest of the IAMP team and all other organizations that has been involved. It's an honor to be with all of you, and we'll meet each other soon again. Jazakallah khairan. Please forgive me for my shortcomings, and all the good comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An honor to be with all of you. We'll meet each other soon. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.